14th.
BBC Radio London.
The leader of Haringey Council has said there will be an internal investigation by the local Labour group after one of its cabinet members was found guilty of possession with intent to supply Class A drugs at a music festival. Ishmael Osamor, who is the son of the Edmonton MP and shadow cabinet member Kate Osamor, has now resigned as a Haringey cabinet member, but has said he will not stand down as a councillor. He was elected in May after several long-standing Labour councillors were deselected in Haringey in favour of more left-wing candidates, and it's emerged that Councillor Osamor was already awaiting trial for the drugs offences when Labour selected him to run as one of their candidates. Councillor Liz Morris is the leader of the opposition Liberal Democrat group and told BBC Radio London he should stand down.
The judge and even his lawyer said he was extremely lucky not to get a custodial sentence, which I'm sure they probably expected. Also, we have to remember that, as a councillor, he will be in contact with children and vulnerable young adults. And I think residents will rightly be very concerned about this, as is the Lib Dem group.
Well, joining us in the studio, our political reporter Susana Mendonca. Susana, just fill people in case they haven't read about and not aware of this case. What's actually happened?
So Ishmael Osamor, as you say, he's a councillor in Haringey, was elected back in May. Now, what happened was, in September of last year, he was arrested at the Festival, and he was arrested in the possession of a number of drugs, Class A drugs, MDMA and cocaine, also a Class B drug, ketamine, and also he had cannabis on him as well. So he was arrested back in September. He ended up in court in October. So this month he was in court and he was found guilty of possession with intent to supply. Now, as we heard there from the Liberal Democrat saying that he avoided a custodial sentence, but he did receive 200 hours of community work and he had to pay prosecution costs. Now, in terms of the value of the drugs that he had on him, it was around £2,500 worth of drugs. Now, this is somebody who's obviously an elected official. What we understand, because he was elected in May, but he was obviously arrested in September of last year and was selected by the local Labour group in around November time. And this was at a time when Haringey was, in Haringey, quite a lot of long-standing councillors were being deselected. So he was selected at that time. And so people have been saying, certainly to me, over the last couple of days, that actually, that should have been revealed sooner. And that had that been revealed, then that would have been against Labour's code of conduct. So, people questioning whether or not he should have ever have been selected in the first place, and certainly whether or not he should continue to be in that position.
Gosh, all right. Well, let's bring into the...
Shall we just...
yes, go on. What do you want to do? Please do.
I just wanted to tell you what Labour have said.
Yeah, tell us.
So we spoke to Labour yesterday. I tried to get an interview with Councillor Osamor. He wasn't available, but got a statement from his mother, Kate Osamor, who is a Labour MP, and she said that he's admitted what he did was wrong and apologised. He's committed to carrying on his work with vulnerable families in the community in North London. And Councillor Ejiofor, who's the leader of Haringey Council, said he only found out about the drugs offences last week and said he was concerned and disappointed and that he's now referred it to the chief whip locally.
Wow. OK, thank you very much indeed. That's Susana Mendonca on this subject of Councillor Osamor, who was already awaiting trial for drugs offences when Labour selected him to run as one of their candidates. He says he wants to carry on as a councillor, working with vulnerable families. I mean, your take on that, especially if you live in Haringey, 0800 731 2000. What do you think of that? Let's go to Martin Ball, who is a local campaigner. Hi, Martin.
Morning, Vanessa.
What's your response to this?
I think it's scandalous that he thinks he can continue as an elected representative. This is way below the standards that we would expect of elected representatives. He has to go. He cannot, in any credibility, talk to local community or people about antisocial or drugs-related problems that they might be having with his background and his drugs conviction.
I mean, this all happened very recently as well, didn't it? It's not as if this is someone of, we often hear about things being dredged up from somebody's past and then everybody says, everyone gets a chance to, reform and everyone should be given a second chance. And this was when they were young and naughty and they're not naughty anymore. But this isn't one of those stories, is it?
We don't know the actual full story, do we? We've got one drugs conviction. We don't know whether there's a habit here, whether there's a serious addiction. he really needs possibly to address some of his lifestyle choices. But that's
what I'm saying is it was September the 8th, 2017. That's what I'm saying. It wasn't 1963 or sometime long ago. It was very, very recently. And he admitted intent to supply. This isn't one of those stories where somebody says, oh, yes, it was a small amount of personal recreational use drugs. This is intent to supply, and it's a pretty broad-ranging a variety of drugs, including ketamine, MDMA and cocaine, among others. I mean, it's recent, and it's I mean, some people would say pretty serious. And what do you make of his mother saying he admitted what he did was wrong and he's apologised? Is that all right with you?
Well, your mum will always be understanding, but what he needs to ask the electors is, if they knew that he was awaiting these charges, would they have backed him as being their local councillor?
Well, what do you mean he needs to ask that? Isn't it somebody else who needs to ask that? Obviously, he's not going to. He says he's not going to stand down, doesn't he? He's staying.
That just shows you the arrogance of a person that says he's admitted he's done wrong and apologised, but clearly he's not prepared to accept the consequences of his actions. He should not be an elected representative. And people in that ward are saying to me, this is not the sort of person. I know a lot of people laugh about Haringey Council and its ineptitude and its poor services and all its internal wranglings, but some of us want the council to improve. We don't want to be a laughing stock, and we don't want to be known as a council where there's an elected councillor who is a convicted drugs supplier, albeit to friends, but supplying Class A and Class B drugs to his friends at the weekend. That is not the right message. That is not the person we want as an elected representative.
All right, if you think that, and so do people who've spoken to you about it, but Councillor Osamor says he's not going anywhere, what happens next? I mean, how do you cope with that?
Let him come on the air and explain himself. If he's apologetic, make himself available. Stop hiding. Come and tell us the context in which he happened to be in possession. Come and tell us where he bought them. These are not just harmless crimes.
But he's been convicted. He doesn't need to tell you anything about how he bought the drugs that he was selling. That's not the point, is it?
But yeah, no, it is. It's important to know, because did he buy them in Tottenham?
He admitted 3 offences of possession with intent to supply MDMA, cocaine, ketamine and cannabis when he appeared at Bournemouth Crown Court on October the 19th. That's it. Isn't it? He was lucky not to receive a 4-year jail sentence. No, but the point is, you don't need him to explain that, but you need him to explain why he thinks he should stay as a councillor, don't you?
Yeah, well, that's what we need to explain that. But we'd also like to hear from, where did he buy these drugs? Because obviously if he sourced them in Tottenham, then clearly the people who are experiencing the antisocial behaviour from people selling drugs on the streets or running a drugs den in their estates or a house next to them, or possibly being threatened, or other criminal activity associated with the supply, production and distribution of drugs in the local area, then he might need to explain to people, why he's prepared to buy drugs but not actually prepared to tackle the consequences around it.
So imagine if he did do that. Imagine if he did. Imagine if he held a press conference and he said, I got convicted. This was my supplier. I got the drugs in this place, in that house, and this road, and this place over there, and then this is how I sold it, and this is the amount of money I've done, and this is my 18th drug deal this year, or my first, or I've never done it before, or whatever it was. Would that make it okay then? Would you be happy for him to remain as a councillor if he did do something like that?
I think this is such a serious offence that it's not plausible for him to remain as a councillor. He's clearly deceived the electorate. I'm not too worried about the internal politics of the Labour Party. He's deceived the electorate as to, his position relating to drugs use. He's obviously not aware of the consequences of just this casual recreational festival drugs taking, and since then,
I think he is aware. That's why he could make a living doing that, if that's what he was doing, or at least have an attempt if it was his first attempt. But final question: you don't want him to stay there. Yeah, but you don't want him to stay. He wants to stay. Is it a stalemate, or is there some way of getting rid of him? How does he have the right to stay just because he says he wants to, or what could happen next?
He has a right to stay because he got elected, and so long as he fulfills the obligations of being a councillor, he can stay for the full 4 terms and pick up public money for doing so.
Right. Well, there we have it, don't we? Thank you very much indeed. That's Martin Ball, a disgruntled local campaigner. This is the story of Councillor Osamor. His mother says he admitted what he did was wrong and he's apologised. She's the Labour MP, Kate Osamor. He is a councillor in Haringey who didn't tell anybody that he was charged with drug possession with intent to supply, and they were Class A drugs, and he was arrested, he was convicted. He was lucky, the judge says, not to receive a 4-year jail sentence. The value of the drugs was around about between $1,500 and $2,500, and he says he wants to stay as a councillor. If you want to give us a call about that, please do. 0800 731 2000. But joining me in the studio with the weather,